Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm Billy Keyserling, the man who's fortunate enough to be the mayor of Beaufort. On this show, we bring in guests who talk about various things that are happening in the community. Last week, we talked about the arts. And for the next 7 weeks, you're going to hear me talk about Candace. Remember, Candace Glover, American Idol, every Wednesday night. You can vote up to 50 times. She's moving up the line. Hopefully she'll be a winner. We'll have a big parade in Beaufort, and she'll get a great record contract, which will be good for all of us. Economic development. Today I have with me as our guest, Kim Statler. Kim is the director of the Lowcountry Economic Alliance, which is now part of the BASE Alliance, the Beaufort and Sumter Economic Alliance. Beaufort has had a long, rough, bumpy road when it comes to economic development. We were a rich community when we had cotton and rice. We were a poor community when the slaves were abandoned. We became a rich community when Northerners came in here and were mining phosphate, and agribusiness came. We were a poor community when the Depression came. Fortunately, the military came in at the end of the Depression, expanded Parris Island, got us going. But quite frankly, we've been in a rut. Because while we do have pretty positive employment numbers, we have a vast number of people who are grossly underemployed. Kim is tasked as the director of the Lowcountry Economic Alliance. There's a varied story about who's in charge of economic development. Beaufort County has basically been the lead, and I think there's a will there. There's not always been the right way. We've had some bumps in the road. We partnered with Jasper County. We found we had too many differences. We found, and Kim will talk about it a little bit, a unique opportunity we found a city that is very close, or county, that is very close to ours. We lost the industrial park, the city of Beaufort. A little uncommon for a city who went ahead and we purchased it, because we do believe that there are opportunities here, that we have some unique features in the workforce that Kim's going to talk about. But when Secretary of Commerce, came to Beaufort, he said, you need 3 things. You need dirt, you need workforce, and you need ideas that are relevant. Kim has been very helpful in arranging meetings for me and other officials in Beaufort County to meet with Secretary Hitt, and I believe we're moving. So let's talk about it, Kim.
I think we're moving too. I mean, I don't think that we'll ever move as fast as you or I would like, or as fast as the market moves. But I do see a trend and an opportunity for us. You know, sometimes an economic downturn creates sort of the reality shock that we're not as good a shape as what we think we are or thought we were. Our economy is so dependent upon tourists and second homeowners and money from outside the area that's related to residential, but we don't have a large or deep business base here, so that's scary. And the last downturn is like nothing we've ever seen. I've seen so many great quotes from folks that, CEOs of important companies that say that, this is not an economic downturn that we're going to come back from. This is an economic reset. And that those communities and companies that can be the most flexible to respond will win, right, and the rest will not. So.
Well, the recession, I'm one who has said on this show and elsewhere, and some people wince, but I think the recession was a good thing in that it did allow us to reset. I know we did it in local government, and if you look at the stock market, you look at productivity, businesses are coming back. What's not happening is that everybody who used to have a job isn't getting a job. That's right. Because businesses have learned about productivity, relationship between productivity and profitability, and they've downsized. They've realized that fewer people can get more done, so that we have these indicators that sometimes don't jive. But on the other hand, that gives us an opportunity because there are new businesses, there's spinoffs.
That's right.
That happen.
Well, profit margins are so thin that businesses are extremely cautious and calculated in moves that they're making right now. So they're looking to communities that are progressive and give them a sense of comfort that, you know, as they take risk, the community's right there with them in tandem to take risk too. I mean, what we've talked about in Beaufort County for a long time is our need to diversify. And there's no one that's watching this show today that probably hasn't seen me on the county channel begging for something, right? So, but I think the important thing to know is that, you know, we have got to allocate resources and align them that prioritize business growth, whether it's existing business or it's enticing new business to come here. I have said this publicly many times that the most important thing we've done in Beaufort County is to protect our environment, because we don't get a second shot at that. And I think we've done that, and we've preserved this sense of place in an incredible way. But you can't do that and forget business on the other shoe, because the people here can't afford to live here long term if we don't have a business base, and we don't. And the retiree is no longer the retiree anymore. My generation, we don't sit around and talk about our retirement date. We sit around
You get so long to wait before that, Kim. Come on. Come on. I can be talking about that, but you don't need to be talking about that.
Well, we're not talking about it because we don't think it exists anymore. My point is, we think that, you know, there is no safety net other than creating a longevity plan where you work as long as you're physically able and you're constantly motivated. And let's face it, I'm not working like my father did. I'm not, you know, physically on the farm working. You know, have what he would say a boring desk job. But I think what's important to know is that how we prioritize our resources in our community are what's going to make the difference. You know, buying the Commerce Park, as much as that's been debated, is absolutely critical to demonstrate we can control the property, control the price point, and be able to be flexible when that company comes to fill competitive gaps that we may find.
Unfortunately, economic is one of those things that can't be talked about in public when it gets specific, because you're talking about individual businesses who don't want their competition to know, who may not want their employees to know.
That's right.
So that I will say that I am cautiously optimistic. It's not happening as fast as I want, but that we have 3 or 4 different things that are percolating. An interesting point, though, is I teach a course at the University of South Carolina, and it's called Civic and Community Engagement. And last night we were talking about workforce, and someone brought up something in the workforce that I hadn't thought about. And that is, we had so many people who came and retired here who intended not to work. And either they got restless, they drank as many martinis as they could handle, they played as much golf as they could handle, they got tennis elbow, or more importantly, their investments aren't carrying them.
That's right.
So that we have this new workforce in Beaufort County of people who've got lots of experience, whose health care is already taken care of through their retirement plan. And here we have students graduating from the University of South Carolina or the Technical College who don't have that experience. They're all of a sudden competing with people who are in their mid-50s or 60s who don't require health insurance, who are happy to be able to have a place to go every day. Workforce, you know, we talked about the dirt, we got the Commerce Park. We got to take a break in a minute, but before that break, let's begin the conversation we'll come back to on workforce, because I think that's real important.
Well, and you and I have talked at length about this, the most important thing internationally and globally moving forward is your labor pool. That's your competitive advantage, and we have to be able to demonstrate that in Beaufort County to be competitive. Our greatest edge that we sell on a regular basis is the exiting military pool. We have over 1,000 people every year that are veterans that don't re-enlist or exit, and we can capture that data. We can show a potential business what it looks like, what kind of training they have. They believe in their reliability and their commitment to our country, so they know that's going to translate over into their company. So we sell that. Our community, because we have such great education behind us, meaning the people that move here or from here are highly educated, we sell that. We sell the underemployment and the ability to move that person from where they're employed now into more gainful employment. And you know, we get a bad rap on our education system too.
Right. And I always say that it's very difficult for that teacher to have the confidence when they try to paint a rainbow. That's right. Because a lot of those people, particularly get middle school edge, say, well, where's the pot of gold? What is how is my life going to be better when I'm an adult? About 4 months ago, Kim called me and asked me if I'd have lunch for the gentleman. He's a prospect. He won't be named. His company won't be named. But what will be named is that he came all the way from England to Beaufort to talk about the potential one day, not tomorrow, but one day putting a plant here. We've got to take a break, but we'll come back to that because I think that's an interesting visit and a segue into the workforce.
Sure, happy to.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Straight Talk with Billy Kay. Today I have with me Kim Statler, who's the director of the Lowcountry Economic Alliance, which is part of the Beaufort and Sumter Economic Alliance, aka BASE. Before the break, I mentioned that Kim had invited me to have lunch with an industrial prospect. Kim, tell us a little, again, generically about the kind of business and why, of all places, he chose Beaufort.
Well, I actually met this particular prospect in Farnborough at the International Air Show, where we go as part of a team to recruit companies to look at South Carolina. And this particular company is part of the aerospace supply chain and currently serves various companies, shall we say, in aviation. So we were there selling South Carolina because of our announcement to Boeing. And I had the opportunity to sell to him, Beaufort specifically, in our proximity between Gulfstream's major investments in Savannah and then Boeing's in Charleston. And the conversation led to, well, what do you have that makes you special, right? So I tossed out to him that, I believe that people are what make the difference in business, and that's what makes your money, and that we believe we have the best people. And I began to explain the exiting military pool, the underemployed, and he stopped dead in his tracks and wanted to know more about that military pool, and could I define it, and could he get access to it, and what difference did that, how did that work, and what were we going to do to, make that come to fruition in the community if he showed up tomorrow? Well, as you know,
he showed up for lunch. I said, "What are you doing all the way from England to Beaufort, South Carolina?" We had lunch at Wren downtown.
That's right.
He said, "I want Marines and sailors.
Yes, that's
and I want children who grow up in a culture, not just the Marines and sailors. I want a culture of work. And if I can be in Beaufort, where there's this source of work or potential workers, where I'm not competing directly with my customers who may be in Charleston, maybe in Savannah, maybe in Greenville, or what have you." He says, "I can get to the workforce first." That's right. And so we have noticed Kim was very helpful to the city, because in buying the park, we weren't going to go and just borrow $1,850,000 and buy a piece of land with a varied history. But one of the things that Kim, in her many years in this job, has come to realize is that while we want to give an opportunity for that middle schooler to look forward to, part of that process is creating a culture. And how do you bridge that culture? And fortunately, that magic number of 1,000, plus or minus, Marines and sailors, coming out of the service, liking to go fishing, liking to go hunting, liking to live in a small town, liking our environment, many of those people would like to stay here if we had jobs for them. So we started a nonprofit, and a number of General Gary Parks, Steve Surratt, a lobbyist, Terry Maud, who has been involved in training. A number of actually started a nonprofit. The city doesn't have to do everything. But we found that even though the United States Department of Labor, the South Carolina Department of Commerce, the South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce, everybody said, "This is a grand idea." Boeing said, "You ought to do this for profit." He said, "I need those kinds of workers." So we formed an organization called TWEAK, one of these where you form an acronym before you figure out what it means, but it has to do with training and transitioning. And fortunately, the Lowcountry Alliance, Kim's organization, was able to seed us. So why don't we talk a little bit about Dwight?
Sure.
Dwight has been on the show before.
Okay, great.
But what he's doing, and then we'll move into how that took us to the relationship with Sumter.
Sure. Dwight's role basically is to serve as the liaison with the military. So he serves as liaison for those folks exiting. So we may have a Marine in our office meeting with Dwight talking about what their exit plan is. He then also is forming relationships with the business community, so he is aware of what jobs are available or coming available, so those two worlds can meet. The culture of the military is so different than the culture of the private sector, and so it's very difficult. They speak two totally different languages.
And vice versa.
Yes, two totally different languages. So what happens is a lot of that Marine's potential is not translated well. They don't sell themselves well, and the company's needs don't translate into military speak. So Dwight is embedded in our world, literally. We share office space with him, and we cross-pollinate our worlds, and so that allows that Marine walking in the door to understand what opportunities are out there and what they really bring to the table. Part of grabbing a pool from that 1,000 exit every year is today Beaufort County doesn't have enough jobs to actually make it work. We don't have 1,000 jobs, right? We wish we did. So we have looked at other communities to say who has something in common with us that understands the value of the military, but also may be able to serve as a catching community, right? Who would grab some of these 1,000 people if a Marine comes in and says, I'm interested. You know, sometimes tough situations provide opportunity, like we talked about with the recession. It was unfortunate when we split with Jasper. We will always care about the future of Jasper. Their people are our people, and vice versa. But that relationship just hit a struggle point that it became too difficult. So the opportunity that came out of that, in understanding our assets and understanding our strategic advantage, was to look to Sumter. Sumter and Beaufort have always had a relationship. We have always dug our heels in to protect our bases. This gives us the opportunity in that conversation to talk about, oh, Sumter, we want to congratulate you on landing Continental Tire. We know they're hiring folks. Would you be interested in receiving some of our military applications? And that relationship and the conversation grew into, how do we sell strategically our two communities to the world and bring more business into South Carolina? We don't use those installations in a marketing way like we could and should.
Right. And,
so,
the other piece is that, as you and I have had conversations with the Secretary of Commerce, is that South Carolina has sort of become dependent upon the bases and not looked for enough.
yeah.
We haven't looked at the opportunities for the private sector here to be working on and around those bases. They've been cloistered. It used to be that when they built forts, they were in the middle of nowhere, and they had their commissary and their recreation and their child support and their schools. Well, it's a different world for the military. In the Congress, in the military authorization bill, they actually have language that is encouraging those people who command these bases to look for stronger relationships between the communities. For example, Beaufort was able, through Beaufort, Jasper, and Water and Sewer Authority, to take over a huge problem for our three bases, and that was handling their water and their wastewater treatment. Sumter's not yet gotten through the gate, and here's a perfect example of how we work together. They have the Army, they have the Air Force. We have the Marine Corps, we have the Navy. The idea of bringing these communities together, not only on the workforce, but on how we begin to recognize and benefit our communities in a stronger way from these relationships by creating even better jobs, not just settling.
I used an example the other day that you have to think of it as, you know, we're so regionally oriented, and regionally I mean we're all about drawing lines and maps, right? In government, we're really good at that.
Unfortunately, we drive lines between things rather than connecting things.
That's right, that's right. But in economic development, our world is based on clustering and a lot of conversations. What do you provide in critical mass to the business community? How do they see that growing, and how do I make that successful? Well, what we're arguing here is that a very critical cluster for South Carolina is the military. And how do we leverage each other in that market relationship to demonstrate how together we are larger to look at in South Carolina from the private sector's perspective. You know, you add our numbers to Sumter's numbers, then they get even bigger. You look at our infrastructure with Sumter's infrastructure, then it's even larger, and the ability to spin off or save the military money, you know, is expanded. So we're basically, you know, coloring outside the line in this relationship?
I believe that, as I've had this conversation, that the governor has just moved the military protection movement out of the comptroller's office and into the Department of Commerce, which is a very smart move. Second smart move is she appointed Bill Bethay, a Beaufortonian who chaired the Ports Authority and has had a number of leadership roles. And we've already begun to have conversations about how, you know, we shouldn't sit on our laurels and every 4 years when someone's running short of money and they talk about closing bases. What we need to do is to have an ongoing relationship to tie ourselves so closely together and create an interdependence that nobody can take it away from us.
Hard to unravel.
And it's hard to unravel.
Yes.
And that's really what the Beaufort County led the nation in terms of the hard to unravel when they came up with the joint land use. Yeah. We used public dollars, federal dollars, and nonprofit dollars to buy and protect airspace. Kim, we talk every day. We could talk for 3 hours. Sorry, guys, you can't participate in all our conversations. We'll have Kim back again.
Thank you.
But I'd like to say that economic development, job diversification is happening in Beaufort County. You're watching from 843, which is the broader area. The Alliance will work with everyone and anyone. If we can help you, or the Alliance can help you, please call us. Kim, how do they contact you?
Call my office, 843-525-7098, or I'm addicted to email, iPhone, whatever. Statler@lowcountryalliance.org. Be happy to help.
Thanks for being with us.
Sure, thanks.